Lawrence, oh wow. I mean, the guy was just such a beast. And in the same way, just so dominant, right? I'm fortunate that we didn't play them a lot. We weren't in the same division.
Right.
So I'm not exactly sure, how that one played out. But my second game in the NFL was in the Meadowlands against the Giants. And again, like I said, we were running run and shoot. And I just remember him coming up at the end of the game and just saying to me, you guys should scrap this run and shoot. You should get a fullback, and you would be unstoppable in this league.
That's what he told you?
And that's what I remember about that particular game, but playing against LT.
I love this man. Everybody calls him LT. I call him Lawrence Taylor. I know the man, Lawrence Taylor. And that's why whatever went down between us, that was LT. Lawrence Taylor? No.
Hey,
We've always been good.
I didn't invite him,
No, you didn't.
but he came anyway.
I came.
He was there.
That's right.
I tell you what, best football friend you could ever have.
Mm.
You know,
And
Yeah.
and
and he can play a little bit.
Lion of Lions.
Wow, this has been incredible.
And I have not found another LT.
Mm.
I ain't found another Mike Singletary. I'm going to lean on this last question with you because I want somebody to know what it feels like to be a LT or Mike Singletary with a Lanier Harris. I want those kids to dream again on how hard it takes to be that, man. A lot of people think they can come do it through talent. Like you guys have me sitting next to royalty, and I know what it looked like.
Oh, yeah.
I watched the legends. And that's why I want the game. I want this moment to be remembered forever for this one reason. You want to learn how to play the game of linebacker? Go back and study Harry Carson. Go back and study Willie Lanier. Go back and study the intensity of Mike Singletary. And go back and study I just don't care about nobody mentality LT. That's what we're looking for, so.
For 10 years, Barry Sanders made the greatest defenders in football chase a ghost. Grown men dove at air. Hall of Famers missed him alone in the open field, with nothing between them and him but grass. But 5 men did something almost nobody else could. One hit him so hard, Sanders still calls it the worst hit of his career. Another held him to -1 yard, in a playoff game, in front of 60,000 people. So who were they? If you want the real history behind the NFL's biggest legends, not just the highlight reels, hit subscribe. This list only gets better from here. Sanders arrived in Detroit in 1989, a rookie out of Oklahoma State, and by the time he walked away 10 years later, he'd rushed for 15,269 yards, third all-time. But here's the stat almost nobody brings up. Sanders also holds the NFL record for the most negative rushing yards by a running back in a career. No one got hit behind the line of scrimmage more than he did. And somehow, he still became the hardest back in history to bring down. That's not just speed. Speed doesn't explain film study. It doesn't explain how, before he even touched the ball, he already knew which number on the other sideline was going to be a problem that day. The men on this list aren't the ones fans usually bring up. They're the ones Sanders studied hardest, the ones who cost him the most sleep on a Monday morning. And the first one, he ran into just 2 games into his career, before he'd proven a single thing to anybody. Sanders arrived in Detroit in 1989 out of Oklahoma State, and by the time he walked away, he'd rushed for 15,269 yards, third all-time. But he also holds the record for the most negative rushing yards by a running back in NFL history. No one got hit behind the line more than he did, and he still became the hardest back ever to bring down. That's not speed, that's film study, knowing which number on the other sideline was trouble before he even touched the ball. The men on this list aren't the names fans usually bring up. They're the ones who cost him sleep on a Monday morning. And the first one, he ran into just 2 games into his career, before he'd proven anything to anybody. Start with the Vikings. Start with a defensive tackle nobody drafted at all. John Randall came out of a school so small most scouts had never heard of it. Texas A&M Kingsville, and 12 rounds went by in the 1990 draft without a single team calling his name. He made it to Minnesota on a tryout, not a contract. By the time he retired, he had a bust in Canton and 137.5 career sacks, still the most of any defensive tackle who ever played the position. But sacks weren't what made him miserable to face. Randall used to go through the media guide before a game and pull out personal details on the guy lined up across from him, his hometown, his college, anything he could throw at him mid-play to get inside his head. It wasn't just a pass rush, it was psychological warfare, snap after snap, for 4 quarters. And he saved his best for Detroit. Twice a year, for the better part of a decade, Randall lined up against the Lions. And more often than not, he owned the day. One trip to the Metrodome, he came away with 2 sacks that sparked a 24-0 run in the second half alone, turning what should have been a close game into a 34-13 Vikings win. Here's the part that mattered most for Sanders, though. Randall didn't wait for him in the open field. He blew up the play before it ever got that far, before Sanders had a lane, before he had a read, before he had anything to work with. Most of the men on this list made Sanders miss. Randall made him earn every single yard just to get untouched to the line of scrimmage. And that's not even the defender who got in his head the worst. Then there's the safety who left behind 2 completely different stories, and somehow both of them are legendary. Watch the documentary on Sanders' career and you'll find it. Him juking John Lynch clean out of his shoes, leaving one of the hardest hitters in the league grasping at nothing but air. For a few seconds, it makes a future Hall of Famer look like a rookie on his first NFL snap. But rewind to December 28, 1997, the NFC wildcard game in Tampa, and it's a completely different story. Sanders tried one of his signature cutbacks, looking for the kind of gain everybody in the building expected from him. Lynch met him in the hole and put him on the ground so hard that Sanders, a man who rarely absorbed a direct shot in his entire career, called it the hardest hit he ever took, full stop. Lynch said guarding Sanders twice a year in that old NFC Central was something that could break your will. On paper, you're the free hitter, the guy with the clean shot. In reality, you're the one responsible for bringing down the most elusive back who ever played, and there's nothing free about that. Here's what tells you everything about where things ended up between them, though. Years later, when Lynch was headed to Canton, Sanders didn't just talk him up from a distance. He personally invited Lynch into his own entourage for his Hall of Fame induction. A man who got embarrassed on camera by Sanders, standing right next to him on one of the biggest days of Lynch's life. That's 2 men who could shake him, if only for a moment. The next one didn't just stop Sanders for a play. He stopped him for an entire game, and it's still the worst afternoon of Sanders' career. December 31st, 1994, NFC wildcard, Lambeau Field, and the NFL's leading rusher that season is about to have the worst day of his professional life. The Packers made one adjustment before that game. They pulled Reggie White off the edge and lined him up inside, so Detroit couldn't just run the ball away from him. It worked better than anybody in Green Bay could have dreamed. Sanders finished with 13 carries for -1 yard. Not 1 yard, -1. It's still an NFL playoff record, and Detroit's team total that day, -4 rushing yards, is the lowest any offense has ever posted in a playoff game. Brett Favre, on the other sideline, called it remarkable, said holding a man he considered the greatest running back ever to negative yardage should speak for itself. White, the man behind the whole plan, put it even simpler afterward. He said it was inconceivable that Sanders could be held to negative yards. Nobody does that to him. Except that day, they did. That's the low point. The single worst afternoon of a Hall of Fame career, sitting right there in the box score for anybody to check. But here's the thing about Sanders. Getting shut down once, even in a playoff game, even by a legend like Reggie White, isn't what defined him. What defined him is who he still couldn't shake, even after everything else. And that brings us to the one name Sanders brings up more than any other, from a game in just his second week as a pro, before he'd proven a single thing to anybody. Detroit was 0-1 heading into Week 2 of the 1989 season. A rookie named Barry Sanders getting his first real look at the NFL against the Giants in New York. He carried the ball 12 times for 57 yards and a touchdown, added 6 catches for 96 more, and still watched the Giants walk away with the win. Not a bad line for a kid 2 games into his career. But the stats aren't why this game still comes up. After the final whistle, Lawrence Taylor sought him out on the field. Not to talk trash, not to hand out a lecture. He told the rookie that if Detroit ever put a fullback in front of him, nobody in the league would be able to stop him. Sanders, 21 years old and standing across from a man he'd grown up watching on television, could barely get a word out. All he managed was, "Thanks." Think about who was saying that. Not a fringe player, not somebody chasing a headline. The man most people still call the greatest defensive player who ever put on a helmet, taking the time, right after a win, to walk over and tell an unproven rookie what he saw coming. Taylor wasn't wrong. And decades later, long after both men were finished playing, Sanders still brings up Taylor's name first when someone asks who gave him the most trouble. It wasn't a hit. It wasn't a stat line. It was one sentence, from one man, and Sanders never forgot it. 5 different defenders. 5 different ways of getting under Sanders' skin. Randall never let him get comfortable before the snap. Singletary admitted, flat out, that once Sanders turned downhill, the game was already over. Lynch got embarrassed on camera and still delivered the hardest hit of Sanders' career in the same rivalry. White and the Packers did something nobody else ever managed, holding him to negative yardage in a playoff game that's still on the books as a record. And Taylor didn't need a highlight. He just needed one sentence, on a random Sunday in 1989, to prove he understood exactly what he was looking at before the rest of the league caught up. That's the real list, not the players who got embarrassed on a highlight reel. The ones who made Sanders work, made him think, made him remember their names decades after the last whistle blew. And maybe that's the real measure of greatness in this league. It's not just what a man does to the people he beats. It's who he remembers beating him, even for a moment. Sanders juked half the NFL out of their shoes over 10 seasons. But these 5 are the ones who stayed with him. And if you ask him today, he'll still tell you, for one sentence, on one Sunday, Lawrence Taylor already knew. If this is the kind of NFL history you actually want, the real stories, not the highlight reel version, hit subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.